Who can tell me who has the most followers on the X platform? Anybody? No. But I know why you're thinking that. Anyone? Any guesses? Not T-Swift. Elon Musk. I feel like he's cheating a little bit since he owns the company. But with 199 million followers, Elon Musk comes in at first place. Who can tell me who's in second place? I know that we talk about how in the Olympics and in sports we never remember who got second place in the first place, but who can tell me who's in second? Any guesses? I'm going to give you about 10 seconds so that we don't spend our whole morning doing this. Who? Trump? Nope, not Donald Trump. Anyone else? It is a former president, I'll give you that. Barack Obama, it comes in at number 2 with 131.9 million followers. Now, who can tell me, because younger people are like, we don't care about X, who can tell me who comes in first on Instagram? Claire. Cristiano Ronaldo comes in first on Instagram. Now, I realize that these numbers fluctuate like daily, but this is as of yesterday when I Googled all of this. Obviously, Google gives us completely accurate information every time, especially now that it's Google AI that gives you the answer, so it's got to be accurate. With 638 million followers, Cristiano Ronaldo comes in first. Anybody know who comes in second? Lionel Messi. It's like she was at my house yesterday hanging out with her friend, and she heard me giving all of these stats. With 504 million followers, 2 football players come in at first and second. That should tell us something in America about what the rest of the world cares about. And just in case you're wondering, especially young females, Taylor Swift comes in with 95.2 million followers on X, formerly known as Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, and 284 million on Instagram. Social media, now after we got through the Zynga phase, who remembers Zynga? Okay, we've got some Zynga people. Who remembers MySpace, where you could format your entire page and have music play when people got on it? After we got through all of those that were kind of like, they sort of work, they were kind of cool, and we got to what was originally called the Facebook, which college kids jumped all over, especially when they dropped off the, and it just became Facebook. College kids were all over it, and then their parents started getting on it, so college kids found something else to get onto because nobody wants to hang out with their parents. We started out this whole social media platform thing by having friends. Anybody remember those days? Now, if you're under the age of 20 in this room, do you remember a time when social media was about having friends as your primary? I didn't think so. See, it was about how many friends can I find? How many people have I known in my past or in my present that I can have as my friends? And granted, we would still get to the point where it was a competition to see who was the most popular based on how many friends they had. But then social media did a shift at some point. I don't know the exact time or the exact year that it started where the friend button became a follow button. But social media became less about having friends and it became more about having influence. And it became less about having friends and more about choosing who you were going to be influenced by. In church, there is a difference between having a friend and having an unknown person influence you. That yes, I would imagine that of the 199 million people who allow Elon Musk to influence their lives, I would guess that most of those 199 million people know who Elon Musk is. But that doesn't mean that they know Elon Musk. They know the public persona that Elon Musk puts out for people to know. They know the companies that he owns, including X, formerly known as Twitter. They know things about Elon Musk, but they're not friends with Elon Musk. As you dive into social research, we begin to see that really in our orbit, we can only truly have about 200-ish people that we truly can have relationship of some level with. Beyond just I know that person from college. It's about the number of people that we see in here on a Sunday morning that we can feasibly walk in here and say that I can, not saying we do, but I can learn everybody's name who is sitting in this room at any given time. 200 is about it. It's not an exact number, but it's about that. But to have the number of people that we can truly have deep friendships with, that number drops way down. Now, this is not, I want to make this very clear, this is not an excuse for some of us in this room to sit here and go, see, I don't have to get to know other people. I just have to have my 12 to 15 close friends and I'm good to go. No, there is an important value that is in that number that goes up to 200, 250-ish, somewhere in that range. But to have true close relationships, the number is closer to 12 to 15. Which seems like a familiar number when we think about Jesus and the number of people that he had true, close interactions with. And to have those people that we can go even deeper with, that are our closest confidants, guess what that number kind of drops down to? 3. Which seems like Jesus had 3 that were a little bit closer to him than the other 9. And the multitudes that were his disciples that we don't even consider his disciples because we only think of the 12. Friends versus influence. There's a difference. I think about the pastors, that I watch their messages, or the authors whose books I read. Those are people who have influenced me, but those are not my friends. Now, some of them are. I know some of the ones who I'm watching their messages online. But as far as most of the people whose books that I read, I don't know John Mark Comer. I don't know Sean McDowell. I don't know J. Warner Wallace. I know about them. I've actually sat down to lunch with J. Warner Wallace. But I don't think that because I've done that, all of a sudden I know everything about him and he is my best friend. In fact, if I called him, he wouldn't recognize my number, and I'm sure that he would do what I do and he would ignore it. He would let it go to voicemail, and maybe he would check it. Because he's not my friend, but he has influence over my life. I've allowed him to influence me. And I've sat in rooms where we sit and we argue about who has the better influence over us. A lot of you started clapping when I said that Taylor Swift wasn't in the top 10, and my guess is that you clapped because you're not super enthused about the influence that she has on our young people. I'm going to let that one drop there, and I'm not going to get on my soapbox and talk about the influence that celebrities have on our young people or even on us. Let's be real. It's not just young people that celebrities are influencing. But I've sat in a room where I talk about how, man, I'm reading this book by this guy, and someone else sits there and goes, oh, that guy's garbage. You need to read this guy instead. Like, their book, what a waste of time. Read this one over here. And it starts to sound a lot like conversations that were happening about 2,000 years ago when the Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 12, when he said, some of you are saying, I follow Paul. Others are saying, I follow Apollos, or I follow Peter, or I follow Christ. They were arguing about who is it that you are allowing to have the greatest influence in your life. And their argument was, this is the one that you should allow to have the greatest influence in your life. Paul is so much better than Peter. No, Peter's better than Paul and Apollos. And they would go back and forth. And Paul's sitting here going, forget us, because we follow Christ. Stop talking about how you follow Paul. I don't want you to follow Paul. I don't want you to follow me. I want you to follow Christ. That's who I'm following, and that's who you should follow. Which again, of course, then they would go out and say, well, Paul told me that I'm supposed to follow Christ. Who's Peter tell you to follow? Because that's what we do in human nature, is we take the person and we still forget that, no, it's not about what they said. It's about who are they telling you to follow. My question for you, or one of my questions for you this morning, is who are you following? Who are you allowing to have the greatest influence in your life? Think through, if you're on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, or the list goes way too long. If you're on those, who do you go and look for their videos the most? And who do you most often take to your friends and say, wow, you got to see this one? Or who are you resharing their post of? And is that individual or that organization having greater influence on your life than Jesus Christ is? I can't answer that question for you. You're going to have to answer that question for yourself. Who are you allowing to have the greatest influence in your life? And if it's Jesus, I'm just going to throw this out right now, that if we're saying that Jesus is the one that we follow first, Jesus is the one that we want to have the most influence in our life, it's going to be a lot more than just sharing a funny video that he put on every now and then. If, he was actually on social media. It would be so much more than just occasionally sharing a little one-liner that people can interpret 20,000 different ways. Because I interpreted this as being a mic drop moment, and the next person saying that seemed like a smack in the face to me. That seemed like an area. It's going to be a whole lot more than that. In Luke chapter 9, in verses 57 and 58, we're going to camp here for the rest of the morning. We're going to unpack what this means. In Luke chapter 9, verse 57 and 58, Jesus is walking down the road, and I encourage you, look at what came before this. But they're walking down the road, they're turning to a village. It says, as they were traveling on the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. That's a bold statement. That's a statement that I've made. That's a statement that many of you have made. Jesus, I will follow you wherever. I'm sitting there at SYC or camp or in a Sunday morning message or worship or whatever it is. I'm saying, Jesus, I will follow you wherever I go. And Jesus looks at him and says, awesome, jump on board. No, Jesus looks at him and says, foxes have dens and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Wow, that's encouraging, Jesus. Thank you for that. Because that is totally the life that I wanted out of this, right? In Matthew chapter 8, we actually see this same story told, but there's one description of this man that's different. And I want to make sure that we catch this difference in this man. Matthew chapter 8 and verse 19 through 20, it says, a scribe approached him and said, teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. So in Luke 9, it's someone said. And Matthew reports it as a scribe or a teacher of the law in some translations approached him and said, teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus told him, foxes have dens and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. I want you to picture for a second that you are sitting at the table, whether it be at lunch today or whether it be at dinner later on tonight, or you go out to eat with someone later this week, you're sitting at the table and there it is right in front of you. The most beautiful, scrumptious, mouth-watering, like saliva's already, it's forming in your mouth and you can't wait. You can feel it hitting your gut, but in a good way. Meal sitting right in front of you. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that meal looks like. I could tell you what my meal looks like, but some of you would sit there and go, that sounds disgusting, and it would totally ruin this whole thing for you. So you're sitting there, and this is like everything is cooked to perfection in this meal. Now, if you're sitting there and you're picturing a healthy meal right now, stop it. Because nobody who is fully sane pictures a healthy meal as the most beautiful. Lori, I'm sorry. I said that out loud, and you raised your hand right as I said it. She does work with youth, so she's not really fully sane anyway. Do you have in your mind? It's there. You're like, oh man, I cannot wait to dig into this. But you're sitting next to that healthy friend. That healthy friend that has the figure that you've been working so hard to get to. That healthy friend who is in training for the marathon or the triathlon or the hike through the Grand Canyon or whatever it is, that all those things you're like, oh, I want to do that so badly. For so long I've wanted to hike a 14er and I've never been able to do it. And it turns out it's smart to train for a 14er. It's also smart to train for a marathon, but that's a story for a different day. And you're sitting next to that friend who is trained and that friend who is ready for all of this, and you've got this beautiful, heavy meal sitting in front of you, and you can't wait to dig into this. And you look next to them and you go, man, I so badly want to go on that hike / run / competition / whatever it is. I want to look like you, man. I want to look like you. I guess you don't really just look at each other and say, woman. I don't know, something about that feels weird. We say man, we don't really say, man, woman, I want to look like you. In fact, most men get punched when they say that. So you're like, man, you have what I want. Let me come alongside you as you've got your fork and your knife ready to dig into your food. And they say, absolutely. Here's a salad. Wait, what? This meal looks real good. I don't want your stinking salad. As my grandpa used to say, I'm not a rabbit. I'm a human being. Here's your salad. You can have some chicken on it. Maybe some eggs, some fat-free dressing, or oil and vinegar. Ugh. What do you do? Okay, absolutely, that sounds great. Isn't that kind of what Jesus says to this man? See, the scribe, the teacher of the law who's talking to him, is someone who very likely, we don't know for sure, but who very likely had some financial means at his disposal. Now, a scribe of the Bible, a Hebrew scribe didn't necessarily make a lot of money, but in the ancient Near East, which is the time that they would have lived, a scribe was somebody who had some means at their disposal. And he comes up to Jesus and he says, hey, I want to follow you and I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus says, okay, I don't have a place to live. You've got money. You've got this beautiful meal sitting right in front of you. I'm eating salad, dude, because I've got something bigger in store. Jesus was functionally homeless. I mean, as you look at his life when he hits about the age of 30 and he begins to launch into what we call his period of ministry, as you look at that, he's staying with his friends. He's not staying in nice hotels. He's not finding the inn. It's like back when he was born. There's no room for him in the inn. There never has been, so why would he stay in them now? No, he's staying with his friends, possibly sleeping on floors or extra beds. Then again, he was the rabbi, he was the teacher, so it's possible they gave him the best room in the house when he came and he stayed there. But it's still not his. And this man who is probably used to having a lot at his disposal is now being told, hey, if you want to follow me, then you're going to need to give that up. That's going to have to go away. Craig Rochelle, a pastor and author, theologian down in the Oklahoma City area, describes self-control as giving up what you want now for what it is that you want most. So my second question for you this morning is, what do you want most out of this life? What is it that when you think of this would be the thing that would leave me feeling the most at peace, this would leave me feeling the most joy, this would leave me feeling the happiest? What is it that comes into your mind at that moment? What do you want most out of this life? Financial security? A family? Nice things, good friends? What is it that you want most out of this life? Jesus looks at this man and he sees a man who has these things and he says, yeah, if you want to follow me, those things that you've put a lot of value in, Jesus didn't just waste words. When Jesus responded to somebody, when he gave them an answer to a question, or even more often when he asked a question of his own to answer their question, it wasn't accidental and it wasn't always and I would say rarely, hey, this is just throw it out there. This is an intentional statement for this person. And for us too, don't get me wrong. So when Jesus immediately goes to with this man, hey, I don't have a home, it was intentional of this man had put his value in his home. He had put his value in his income. He had put his value in the financial security that he had. And Jesus went straight to the heart of the issue. In Luke chapter 14 and verse 28, it says, Jesus says, "For which of you, wanting to build a tower, doesn't first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough to complete it?" See, Jesus isn't talking to the same man in Luke chapter 14, but he is talking to us, and he is talking to the people then saying, hey, there's going to be a cost in following me. The truth of the matter is, no matter what it is that we want most in life, there will be a cost to obtain it. The only thing in life that comes free is grace, and really that cost him everything, so it wasn't free. But the only thing for us that comes free in life is grace, but it still comes at a cost of we have to sacrifice some things that we might otherwise want, and some things that we might otherwise do. And I realize that is a part of the message that has a lot of people saying, see ya, I don't want any part of that. It happened with Jesus when he would talk to them. And he would tell them, here's the cost of following me. And you see the multitudes look at him and say, nope, never mind. That's not what I want. I'm out. Peace. In Mark chapter 10 and verse 17 through 27, we see an interaction that he has with a man that we call the rich young ruler. And this man comes up to him and says, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And he looks at him and he says, you gotta follow this command and this command and this command, follow them all. And he's like, I've done that. I'm great. I'm good. And Jesus says, nope, one more thing. Because he goes straight to the heart of the issue. Take everything you have, sell it, give it to the poor, which I understand the church would typically say, sell it, bring it to us. He says, sell it, give it to the poor, and then you can come follow me. Then you can come follow me. See, people then were waiting on a totally different type of kingdom that Jesus was going to bring in. There are these two kingdoms at odds with each other that the people were thinking that if I follow Jesus, I'm getting on board with another earthly kingdom, and that means I'm going to have wealth and I'm going to have power because Jesus is the Messiah who's going to come in. He is going to free us from Roman oppression. We're going to have the control again. We are going to be over the Romans. We're going to overthrow the whole thing, and we're going to be top dogs, and I want on board with that. And what Jesus constantly did is said, I don't have anything to do with that. My kingdom is not a kingdom of this world. My kingdom, it's not the gravy train, people. In fact, if you want to follow me, it's going to be the total opposite as far as the world is concerned. All that prestige that you think you're going to have, forget it. It's not going to happen. All that money that you think is going to come with this, it's not happening. People, I don't have a home. But at the same time, see, here's the thing. Some of us are sitting here and we might be thinking, sweet, I don't have any money anyway. This is easy. It's not about the money. That's the thing about when Jesus talks, it's intentional for the person he's talking to, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have anything to do with the other people who are listening and with us who are reading it generations later. Because it's not about the money, it's about the idols. It's about those things that we have said, I want Jesus most, but what we really want most is this. This comes before Jesus any day when it comes to making our decisions. And Jesus is saying that anything that you won't give up for me is an idol in your life. And you got to smash that thing down. You've got to knock it over, tear it apart, grind it to dust. You cannot allow it to have even a hint left in your life because it will come roaring back later on in your life if you don't get rid of it now. If it is wealth, he says, give it away. If it is power, he says, humble yourself. If it's position, he says, find a new job. If it's a house, he'll say to downsize. If it's a family, he'll say, submit every decision you make in that family to the Father. Every idol that you have in your life, he says, get rid of it. This is what it takes to follow me. See, it's not about money. It's about idols. He's not making an invitation to poverty. I've heard that before as a pastor, that, well, pastors should all live in poverty. And some people truly believe that pastors should, and some of you might be sitting here going, yeah, the pastor should be po. Like, you can't afford the R at the end. He should just be po. Actually, that'd be poo. Just P-O. And now my wife is sitting down there going, I cannot believe that he just said that in the message. It's not an invitation to poverty, people. It's an invitation to something better than all of those things that we might put ahead of him in the first place. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus says that again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who is seeking fine pearls. And upon finding one pearl of great value, he went, and what did Jesus say to the rich young ruler? He said, sell everything. What did he say to the scribe who walked up to him? He says, I don't have a home. And when this person finds this pearl of great price, it says he sold everything he had and he bought the pearl. Everything he had. Doesn't say most of the things, but enough so that he could still be comfortable on the side. Everything he had. It doesn't say he got rid of most of the shows in his life, but he held a few on for the side. He said everything he had. And he went out and he bought the pearl. 2 Corinthians 5:1, Paul writes to the church in Corinth, he says, for we know that if our earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God, a house not made by hands, eternal in the heavens. Church, several of you have built your own homes, and they are beautiful homes. I love going over to your houses and seeing those homes. And even if you haven't built your own home, I still love your house, don't get me wrong. But no matter how new that house is, and no matter how long ago you built it, someday, if this world is around long enough, that house won't be there anymore. It'll fall down, burn down, tornado will come take it, termites will get it, something will happen to that home. And it won't be there anymore. It is a temporal home. And we can choose to put all of our value in the things that are temporary in this world. Or we can choose to accept the invitation that he gives us to put our value in the things that are eternal, that never end. Jesus is pretty clear and he's pretty honest. And we're going to look for the next 2 weeks, we're going to look at two more pretty straightforward answers he gives when people say that they'll follow him. And they're not the kind that have you, when you initially read them, going, sweet, I'm on board with that. That sounds awesome. No, they're the kind that you read and you go, that's given up a lot. And it is. Jesus doesn't mince words. He says, if you want to follow me, you're going to give up a lot. But what you're going to get is going to be so much better. You could sit down and you could eat that 4,000 calorie meal that looks absolutely divine. But I guarantee you, when you get out to run your marathon the next day, you're going to absolutely regret your decision. I get it. Some of you are like, I'm never going to run a marathon. Don't worry about that. Because usually that's the response I get, like, marathon runners are idiots. Why would I want to do something like that? Sorry, those marathon runners out there. Yeah, you could do that, or you could give it up and have something greater. We could hang on to the things that we put our value in. Or we could walk alongside the one who can calm the storms. Who, when the waves are raging, can say, waves, be still. He can do it with literal waves, and he can do it with the waves that are in your life crashing down upon you, leaving you with no peace and no joy. You have an invitation to walk along with the one who calms the storm, and to move into an eternal home that moths can't destroy, fire can't destroy, tornadoes aren't going to come wipe it out, a hurricane down in Florida can't touch it. That's our invitation, church. Does it come at a cost? Yes. So I asked you earlier, what do you want most out of this life? If you want financial security most out of this life, then we've got to be honest with ourselves and we've got to say, hey, if I want financial security, then as Dave Ramsey puts it, I need to live now like no one else so that I can live later like no one else. Meaning if you want financial security later on, hey, stop racking up the debt on the credit card. Stop going out to eat. Stop buying stuff you can't afford. And that's how you'll get to financial security. You have to give up what you want now for what you want most. If what you want most is good friends in this life, then it's time to give up the gossip now so that you can have the trust of your friends later in life. Give up what you want now for what you want most. If you want kids who are going to follow after God, I realize this is not a guaranteed formula, but you're going to have to give up the cool rep now so that you can have the committed kids later. I realize that none of those are a guarantee. But they're the sacrifices you're going to have to make to have a chance. Here's the thing about God's invitation. If you'll give up the ways of this world now, it is a guarantee that you will have an eternal home later. And you can start getting ready for that eternal home now and being prepared to move into it. So what do you want most out of this life? If your answer to that question this morning is, I want Jesus. I know that there's going to be temptations on your life and there are going to be things that are pulling you away from that decision. There's going to be things that are pulling you away and trying to tempt you to come towards them instead. But if you're sitting there this morning and, hey, whether it's for the first time you're sitting there going, no, that payoff sounds pretty good. That whole, peace in the face of storms, that sounds pretty good. Or that eternal home, that sounds pretty good. If you're sitting there this morning for the first time or the 20th time saying, I want Jesus most, then I'm going to invite you to do something that I know that 75% of us in this room don't like doing. Maybe 95% of the people in this room don't like doing. I'm going to ask you to come forward and make a statement about that. Because the church is not just about making personal decisions and not letting anybody know. The church is about walking together in this. We've got a board right here in the front that just simply says, I want Jesus most. And I'm going to invite you to come forward and to write your name on that board. You don't have to sit up here and confess all the things that you're struggling with. You don't have to sit up here and say, these are all of the things that I'm going to give up so that I can follow him most. But if you're hearing an invitation from him that says, hey, I don't have a home. If you want to follow me, you're going to have to give up now for what you want most. And if you're sitting here this morning saying, I want to do that, then I invite you to come up to sign the board. And then you can grab your seat again. Or you can stay up here and pray. That's totally up to you. Will you make that public declaration that he is the one that I want most?